Here we go. Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thank you for joining to listen to me talk about mountain lions. I'm going to be talking about specifically mountain lions in California. So hello, as Betty mentioned, and Betty probably knows me more than she wants to. I'm sitting in the lovely house she helped me purchase. And Diego, it's nice to see you on the call as well after he also was integral in making this happen. So hello. Anyways, I'm a human wildlife interactions advisor at UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. So if we were in person, I would ask everyone to raise their hand if they'd ever heard of cooperative extension. So I'm not sure if anyone has, but I did want to just briefly mention what it is, because it's in every state. So regardless of whether you are living in the Bay Area or not, you do have access to extension advisors to help you on a whole range of issues. So cooperative extension was created, over 100 years ago, and every land-grant university in the US has a cooperative extension arm. And so University of California is California's land-grant institution. And the whole purpose of cooperative extension is to really bridge that gap between research that's done at universities and then people on the ground who can actually use that research to either improve their agriculture or just improve their lives. And it did historically start with a very agricultural focus, but it's since broadened, now deals a lot with child nutrition in California. Master gardeners are part of cooperative extension, master food preservers, and also wildlife advisors. So we conduct both outreach and research on whatever the pressing needs are for the people within our region. And I cover 7 counties throughout the Bay Area. It's a huge geographic scope. So if you happen to live anywhere in the Bay Area, I'm more than happy to help you. And of course, I was loving all the Africa photos and mentions during the introductions. Hugh, love to chat further with you, learn more about Tasimba safaris. But my life has changed a bit. I've gone from researching African lions and African species. Here I am with one of the lions that was part of my PhD project. We immobilized him thanks to Dimbo, the tracker, sand tracker, they are amazing, worked side by side for years with many trackers. We were able to immobilize this lion and fit him with the GPS collar. And you can just see the tip of the collar there. With male lions, it's nice because the collars are really hidden by the mane. But now back to the US, have this cute kiddo named Emily. Hopefully you don't hear her crying in the background. If you do, that's her. Same with the dog, who'll probably try to push her way into the office at any point. But anyways, that's what I do. And so today I'm going to be focusing on mountain lions. And I'd be remiss to not start off with just a brief history of mountain lions in California and our management of them, because I think that's really important to keep in the back of our minds when we're thinking about mountain lions in our lives today. Second, I'm going to be going over various ways that we can coexist with them. And this is the bread and butter of of my work with mountain lions in this position, is how can we find ways to peacefully coexist? And third, it's timely given the AQI outside and the smoke. But I often get asked, what are the effects and impacts of fire on mountain lions and coyotes? So I wanted to address some of the research that's been done by others on just that question. And there's also been some interesting research done on COVID and mountain lions in terms of the shutdowns and how that impacted their behavior. So I thought it'd be fun to end with some cool facts that are, just within the last few years we've discovered about them. So first off, people may not think about this in the United States, but we actually have a fairly unique, historically, way of thinking about managing wildlife. And it's quite different than many other countries. And this has far-reaching impacts. So whose wildlife is it? Does anyone, so think about that for a second. Who actually owns the wildlife in the United States? Well, it's owned by us. We all own all of the animals within the US. However, they're managed by the state. And that's a really important distinction. Because that means if you own a massive ranch anywhere in the US, you're going to have lots of animals on it. And while you technically own all those animals, right? We jointly as Americans own our wildlife. It's managed by the state. So you can't just do whatever you want depending upon the species, right? And depending upon the state, they're going to classify different species differently, whether you need, a permit to hunt one or whether you just simply can't hunt one, et cetera. And of course, the state is under federal, right? So if you have an federally endangered species, that takes precedence. But otherwise, the wildlife is going to be managed by the state. And who pays for wildlife management? And this is another one that's, for good or bad, in the US, really money is going to be driving a lot of decisions and focuses. And so actually, people don't often realize who pays for wildlife management. And it's a combination of the Pittman-Robertson tax on firearms and ammunition, and a percentage of hunting tags and fishing licenses goes to the state wildlife management. And then also the government will provide some money. And that'll, of course, vary depending upon the state, depending on the administration, and depending upon that year's annual budget. But when we think about who's paying for wildlife management, you can see a common thread here. So it's mostly through hunting, right? Hunting and fishing. And so what does that mean for the setting of wildlife management goals? Well, historically, a lot of the focus has been on animals that we hunt or fish, right? Because that's actually what's paying for wildlife management. So there's a bit of an potential incentive for state agencies to then focus on managing the species in which we hunt. And so that's why, there's a lot of focus on species like, elk, bighorn sheep, deer. And that means that there's shockingly still a lot that we need to learn about mountain lions in the US. There is still a lot of behavior that we don't fully understand. And there's a lot of research that needs to be done. And I highlight this just to point out that hasn't been historically, the money or the interest in doing a lot of research on mountain lions in the US and what they're up to. But that has shifted, and now there is much more interest in that. But it means there's still a lot that we have to learn. And so when we're trying to figure out how to coexist with them, really it's just the beginning of the story. And over time, I hope that we're able to vastly improve our understanding of the species and therefore how we can better coexist with them. Now, of course, we all know of the historic removal of predators, and including a bounty on mountain lions in California until, not that long ago, just 1963. I had to check my number there. And these bounties were, quite low. I think it was around $20 per mountain lion. Although if you were to, adjust for inflation, that'd probably be quite a bit more. I didn't do that calculation myself. But that had really big ramifications when we removed on a large scale so many of these apex predators from the landscape within California. Now, in California, we're unique in that we actually have Proposition 117, which was passed by voters, the California Wildlife Protection Act of 1990. And this is perhaps the most important legislation when we think about mountain lions today, because it classified mountain lions as a specially protected mammal within the state. So that outlawed game hunting of them and put in further regulations about their management. And if we're looking here, just fun mountain lion fact, you may not know that they actually are born with spots. These are adorable mountain lion cubs or kittens. You can say either one. And they actually have blue eyes as well. And over time, as the cubs grow up, the spots will go away. But now that some of these mountain lion populations are luckily recovering, how do we coexist with them? Because when we think about it, we've had generations of livestock producers and people in residential areas that have never encountered a mountain lion or never needed to think about them. They've never needed to consider them in their management plan for their livestock. But now that some of these populations are rebounding in certain areas, for the first time, now mountain lions are posing a threat to livestock or people are encountering them. And so this has led to a lot of, I think, fear and, not uncertainty over what best practices there are. And that's really where myself and other researchers throughout the state are working hard to better understand mountain lions and to better educate people so that we all know how we, certain techniques for changing our behavior, because unfortunately the onus is going to be on us to learn how to live peacefully with them. And whether that's with your pet dog, your pet cat, your commercial cattle production, many people nowadays keep a few goats or a few sheep. This is increasing, and particularly as we're using these small stock to help with fuel reduction to prevent fires, or livestock sheep production, which still, is occurring in the state of California. And the biggest thing that I always tell people when we're thinking of conflict with mountain lions is your past doesn't dictate your future. Now, you can use this in all sorts of inspirational speeches and other aspects of your life, of course, but it's really important to consider when we're thinking about human-carnivore conflict, and particularly about mountain lions. Because I can tell you that about, 95% of the people that I interact with who have lost an animal or had a negative experience, their first words out of their mouth when I come to their property is, but this has never happened before, and my family's been ranching here for generations, or I've owned this house for 40 years and I've never had this happen. I've never lost an animal to a mountain lion. And that may be true, but don't let that assumption that it hasn't happened yet lead you not to be proactive in better management of your animals. And so that's really the biggest thing, is that people get really just used to what's happened in the past, but things are changing, things are evolving. I'm personally very glad that mountain lions are recovering and growing in the state, but that does mean that we now do need to pay attention to, do they potentially occur in my area? And if so, what changes do I need to make to better manage my animals and my property? So what are my options if I have livestock and pets? What can I do? And luckily, there are quite a few options available to you. So the biggest thing that I educate people on is night penning. And this is one of the most effective tools at our disposal. And this image here was actually a family friend. My neighbor growing up down in Los Altos, she also owned a property up in Grass Valley. And she decided to start raising alpacas about, 20 years ago. And she had these beautiful alpacas out in her, 1 acre field. One night, a mountain lion got in, killed half of them, and the other half died of fright. So you can imagine the horror of coming out and all of your beloved animals are dead. And unfortunately, this can happen with cats. If they get in an enclosure, they can kill every single animal in it. And that isn't something we like to acknowledge, but that is the truth. So that's what I always tell people. If they lose one animal, you know what? You were lucky that it was just one. Cats have this innate desire to chase. And so when we have captive animal or domesticated animals that are in an enclosure, what happens is they're going to panic, right? They're scared and they start running. And that's where we can get this surplus killing, where the animal doesn't eat everything, but it's just triggered to continue chasing. And so what did my neighbor do? Luckily, she went all in trying to protect her animals, built a massive fence, got livestock guardian dogs, which I'll be mentioning next, but also started night penning her animals in this enclosure. And notice there's a roof. People often forget about this with mountain lions, right? They can easily jump 12 to 15 feet, no problem. So if your enclosure doesn't have a roof, you can just let them waltz right in. And really, this night penning, we encourage doing it from dusk until dawn, because that's when mountain lions are most active. Caveat as always, right? It's not 100% effective. Some mountain lions will hunt during the day, but it is rare. And if you are locking up your animals in an enclosure at night, you're significantly reducing the odds of losing them. Now, it does require appropriate fencing. Mountain lions are clever. And if there's any gap, 6 inches where they can get their head in, they'll somehow find a way. And even a gap where they can get their paw in. And again, people don't always realize this. They have a barn, let's say, but there's a gap this big. Well, it actually happened where my office is based at UC Elkis Ranch over in Half Moon Bay. They had lost a few animals to mountain lions, so they began night penning in the barn, but they didn't catch one hole. And the mountain lion passed by, was able to get its arm through that small gap, reach around, right, and catch something, and unfortunately kill it. So you really have to think like a mountain lion when you're looking to see if your enclosure is actually mountain lion proof. And of course, this tool is only as effective as the effort you put into it. And also can't tell you the number of times talking to people where it's the one night that they were out late or they're having a party. They're like, oh, it's just one night that I won't put my animals in. And of course, that's the one night that a mountain lion happens to walk through their property. So next, livestock guardian dogs, otherwise known as LGDs. These are very effective tools, and they protect your animals 24/7, right? So this is an added benefit. But just want to make sure you can, my screen isn't blocking it. What is the photo of this dog doing, right? It's barking. And anyone who lives in an area near an LGD, maybe your neighbors have one, or maybe your community uses them for fuel reduction, you know that they bark. And unfortunately, that is part of their job. So if you're considering a livestock guardian dog, you want to think about your neighbors, how close they are and how they might feel about a dog barking appropriately at night. And then, of course, cost and care. But these are really fascinating tools because they work in 3 different ways. First, by exclusion. So they let predators know that they're there. So if you turn them out in a pasture, their first thing is going to be going the perimeter of the pasture and marking, letting them, and that's also where barking comes in, right? They're letting the mountain lions, they're letting the coyotes know, like, hey, big guy over here, you're not going to want to come over here and mess with me. Second, they're going to work by interrupting the actual hunting behavior of carnivores. And I was almost going to show it to you, but if you want to see, there's really cool footage that just came out from National Geographic. If you Google it, nighttime footage of LGDs and sheep in Chile. And they had military grade nighttime cameras that were actually able to film a mountain lion coming down a hill, jumping into a sheep pen at night, and then the LGDs waking up, barking, and chasing the mountain lion off. So that's how they work, right? Is another way is if the mountain lion actually gets close enough, the dogs are going to break that behavior by confronting them. And third, these dogs work by, if necessary, physically confronting the predator. And that's very rare, right? Mountain lions don't want to fight. Typically just a bark will be enough to get them to go off. But if they're desperate enough and really going after livestock, these dogs will put themselves in danger to fight off the predator. So some other tips for keeping pets safe, keeping your adorable cat inside. Just know, unfortunately, anytime a cat is outside, it's definitely at risk from predators, coyotes, but also mountain lions. Removing attractants like pet food and trash that can attract prey species. So mountain lions themselves aren't going to be getting into your trash or eating your dog food, but they absolutely will go after the raccoons that are getting in your trash or eating your dog food. And people don't often think that through. Discourage deer from lingering on your property, right? Love this photo of the deer sticking its tongue out that I got on rangelands. But mountain lions eat deer, right? So if you are encouraging deer to be on your property, that's just encouraging mountain lions to come close to your house. And keep in mind, mountain lions can easily climb a 12-foot fence. They can jump even higher. So you shouldn't be surprised. If you have lots of deer and they happen to be in your backyard, your 6-foot wooden fence is not going to be excluding a mountain lion. And they also won't be excluding a coyote. People often don't realize that. Coyotes are very good jumpers as well. Avoid walking pets between dusk and dawn, but if you do need to, right? So if you're an early morning person, you need to get the dog exercised before you head to work. Keep your dog on a short leash. And then lastly, there's this visual barrier idea. And so this is an idea that was developed in Africa fairly recently. So they use these kind of like shade cloth in their bomas or corrals. at night, and it's been found to be very effective at stopping African lions and leopards from entering the corrals and hunting the livestock at night. And so this is an idea that we're now testing in California on mountain lions as well, to see if it'll be as effective here, which would be great because this is a low-cost way to help protect animals. And the idea being that you're just breaking that that visual sense. So if a mountain lion's walking past your fence and there are goats inside, they're not able to look through and see that movement and see the animals. Cats are very visual in their hunting. That's why, if you're on a safari with Hugh, and let's say you're in a soft-sided tent and African lion walks by, you don't need to be worried. They're not going to be breaking into your tent, right? They respect that. They don't see you. They just ignore it. A bear in California, if you have food in your tent, that tent's going to be no barrier at all to them, right? They'll go right through it. They'll go right through a barn if they're hungry enough. That's happened to a few people I've worked with, right? They've literally just ripped open the barn to get the sheep. Cats aren't like that. So potentially we're going to try to tie into this visual idea and see if this will work. And I hope it does. But of course, livestock and pet depredation is not the only threat to mountain lions, right? One of the biggest causes of mortality in California is actually roadkill. And this largely is dispersing individuals that have nowhere to go but into a highway, right? They're trying to disperse, find their own territory. These cats move very long distances. This is an example of one individual that was collared by True Wild, which is a project I'll be talking about in a moment. But you can see this was just over a 6-week period, this map here. But I think he was originally collared around Santa Rosa, then went north all the way down. He ended up near Mill Valley. So this is P36. He crossed Highway 101 5 times, which is very impressive to be able to do that, as we all know, having driven it. That's a very busy highway. And then at one point you may have read about, it was in the news, he actually was in Tiburon. He managed to make it all the way there before turning back north and heading back up. And unfortunately, he did die, about a month ago. But having these highways is a big issue for mountain lions, and it's really inhibiting their ability to move throughout the state. So what can we do about it? This is where there's now a recent push to increase wildlife crossings. And I believe Beth Pratt from National Wildlife Federation spoke with you guys a few years ago, and she's been really key down in Southern California, pushing for the creation of the Wallace-Annenberg Liberty Canyon Wildlife Crossing, which is really exciting that that's going to be happening. And there are also these planned crossings over and under Highway 17 in the Santa Cruz Mountains. But the idea of these crossings, and this is an example from the Yellowstone to Yukon initiative, is it allows the animals to safely cross the freeways. And it also helps protect us, right? Think of how dangerous it is to hit a deer on a highway. Actually, a lot of people die each year in the US. It's incredibly dangerous to be having these animals on the highways. So by having them go over or under, it's beneficial to the animals, it's beneficial to us. So I really want to put a plug in for supporting wildlife crossings, even though, in California, they are expensive, but they're worth it. So a little bit more on my research. I work a lot on research projects with livestock guardian dogs, looking at their effectiveness. How can we improve their effectiveness? Also looking at their interactions with wildlife and with livestock. I'm also trying to increase the accuracy of reporting of livestock losses in San Mateo County. If we can't help what we don't understand, right? I'm really trying to help our understanding of what's going on in San Mateo County. And that's an interesting county because in the rest of the state, most of the livestock depredation is on smaller animals like goats and sheep. But San Mateo County seems to have more of a problem with losing calves to mountain lions. So we're really trying to understand that. And the issues in San Mateo County have led to me being a co-principal investigator on the recently launched Bay Area Carnivore Livestock Interactions Project. And I'll talk about that next. I'm also expanding my role in addressing human-carnivore conflict in Marin and Sonoma counties through collaboration with True Wild. So here we are, part of or in collaboration with UC Santa Cruz, they're deploying a GPS collar onto a mountain lion. So Bay Area Carnivore Livestock Interactions Project. For those of you down in San Mateo or Santa Clara counties, I wanted to put a plug in for this. So it's a project led by myself at UC Cooperative Extension, Colorado State University, and Panthera, which is an NGO dedicated exclusively to the conservation of large cats. It's supported by Mid-Peninsula Regional Open Space District. So if you've gone hiking in San Mateo or Santa Clara County, odds are it was on one of Mid-Pen's properties. They manage a lot of land that is open to the public. And it's also funded by the Ayers Wildcat Conservation Trust. And we have a whole host of collaborators, but I do want to particularly do a shout out to the Santa Cruz Puma Project, and they're going to be instrumental in moving this project forward. And so two of the main things that we're doing for this project are testing predation deterrents to see their efficacy. So we're going to be testing fox lights, which are lights that are very bright at night. We're going to be testing turboflaggery, where we have electric wire with these flags tied to it. It works for excluding wolves, and some research has shown that it also is effective against coyotes. There's just something about those moving flags that canids really don't like, and they just don't want to cross it. And so we're going to be seeing if this works for mountain lions as well. And we're also going to be testing some newly developed prototype tools that are, motion activated, variable sounds, lights, just trying to see if we can, try to scare mountain lions away from these livestock areas. And your role, if you live in San Mateo County, is to contact us if you find fresh roadkill deer. Weird ask, I know. Not many people drive around with a tarp, but I do. So let me know if you find roadkill deer on like 280, let's say, and I'll come pick it up and we use it for our research. We're also measuring individual recidivism rates. So what I mean by that is we're trying to see for livestock attacks, is it done by repeat offenders or is it just once-off events? So our own little version of CSI, where we come in for when animals have been attacked, use cotton swab, swab the bite marks, and we're able to collect the DNA of the individual animal that was responsible for the attack. And we're then sending it to the lab, and they can tell us what species. So was it carnivore or coyote or mountain lion? And then actually which individual mountain lion was it? And so we're going to be, over the next 4 or 5 years, looking at these rates to get a better understanding of how often certain individuals may be attacking animals. And so again, your role, if you live in San Mateo or Santa Clara County, if you know of anyone who loses an animal, or if you're unfortunate enough to have that happen, please contact us, and if you're willing, we'll come out and we'll swab and we'll collect this information. Now, recently I've formed a collaboration with True Wild, which runs the Living with Lions project. So for all of you guys in Marin and Sonoma, you may know about this project already. It's been going on for quite a few years, and it does some really fascinating and groundbreaking work on mountain lions and trying to mitigate conflict. So I'm really excited at this new collaboration to be expanding my reach into these counties. So this is their study area. It's quite large. So if you live anywhere within here and you are interested in following, they can share the website, share some more information. There'll be a call of action for you guys in a minute. But one of the big parts that True Wild is working on is trying to deploy more satellite GPS tracking collars onto mountain lions. And they have some really great technology for capturing them in traps and then deploying these collars. And a big call to action for all of you guys up in the North Bay. Again, if you lose an animal or know someone who does, Sonoma County, Novato area, there are a lot of these smaller parcel livestock owners. So when you drive around, you'll see bucolic fields with some goats and sheep, and it's really being used quite widely for fuel reduction as a result of those, really terrible fires years ago. But there are quite a few small stock on the landscape. And so if you do know or hear of someone who loses an animal, please have them contact either myself or Quentin Martins, who runs True Wild, because they're trying to deploy as many of these GPS collars as possible onto the individual mountain lions that are causing depredation events. And these are really the most important individuals to study from the perspective of learning how we can mitigate conflict. Okay, I'm short on time, but these will be quick. And I just had to interject a cute mountain lion video taken a few weeks ago from one of the True Wild's collared cats. A litter, just because who doesn't want to see baby mountain lions, right? All right. So a few fun facts that I will leave you with. So first, what happened during the COVID shutdowns? You probably read lots of articles about wildlife. So in the Santa Cruz Mountains, Wilmer's lab, who runs the UC Santa Cruz Puma Project, they found that mountain lions relaxed their aversion to urban areas during the shutdown. So this is, I think, fascinating. So literally within a matter of days to weeks, the mountain lions changed their behavior. They realized people were moving around less. And so they were able to relax their avoidance of urban areas and use more of them. So it just shows the behavioral plasticity of these animals, and they're really keeping an eye on what people are doing and are responding accordingly. Now in Southern California, they found that mountain lions that were collared there, they moved less and actually reduced their territory sizes during shutdown. Now, what does that tell us? That says that people are forcing mountain lions to move a lot more than they would like to, right? So when there's not a shutdown and there's a lot of human activity, the mountain lions are needing to move a lot to try to traverse and avoid us. But when there aren't as many people moving around on the landscape, mountain lions can be a lot more efficient in their movements. And so they are able to conserve their energy much better. And so when you think about it, kind of an indirect impact of humans and us on the landscape is we're causing mountain lions to need to move a lot more than they would otherwise. We're causing them to expend a lot more energy as a result of avoiding us. And you can think of the continued indirect impacts, right? They're probably needing to hunt more than they would otherwise because they're spending a lot of energy trying to stay away from us. Lastly, I wanted to mention fire and wildlife, because I hear questions about this often as we look outside, right, and think about the fire going on further north. So kind of two impacts of fire, direct impacts, right, who can escape. Unfortunately, some animals are not able to. Mountain lions typically are able to escape the flames, although there have been instances where they can't, or where their paws are burned. And actually, California Department of Fish and Wildlife was able to successfully capture one of these cats a few years ago in Southern California and rehabilitate the feet and then release it back in the wild. But so that is something to consider. But indirect impacts, and actually fire can be a hunting opportunity, which is counterintuitive, right? So deer that have been collared during fires up in Sonoma County, they barely moved at all. They were just able to directly avoid where the flames were because there are always some patches that aren't burning. So the deer, and within a day, were right back even to the burned areas. And the deer actually like the burned areas because you get the regrowth of grass and bushes. And so that's fresh forage for them. And so that leads mountain lions to then actually be then just following the deer. And so mountain lions, in terms of on a territory-wide scale, don't seem to be as impacted as carnivores like coyotes, who just lose their prey items, right? Because the rabbits aren't able to escape. So some research out of Sonoma County, they actually didn't find big changes in home ranges of the mountain lions as a result of those fires. So it's not that mountain lions were suddenly, completely shifting their territories. That actually didn't happen. Of course, still risk of burned paws. In Southern California, they did find that there was an increased risk of conspecific fighting. So the mountain lions, as they were, avoiding the fires within their territories, were more likely to run into each other, which led to fighting among them. And they were forced to be closer to freeways because there are so many freeways on the landscape down there that as mountain lions, still within their territories, but were forced closer to roads. So some interesting things to think about as California continues to face, pretty serious fire seasons. Although hopefully this summer, this season at least, we escape it like we have so far. Anyway, sorry, I went a few minutes over, but thank you so much. I could talk mountain lions and carnivores all day. Hard to choose just a few things to discuss. But if you have any questions, or if you want to learn more, or again, if you're in one of San Mateo County, Sonoma, Marin, and you lose an animal, and you're willing to have me come out, please, here's my personal cell number, and my ANR email. And thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much indeed. Really loved the presentation. And if I may ask the first question, when you were a little girl growing up, when did you first realize your life work would be with animals?
I think my parents would say from the beginning. I was always obsessed with animals, with dogs. So I grew, that was kind of my first love. But I was very lucky. My family also enjoyed wildlife. So growing up, we would pretty much all of our family vacations were focused on wildlife viewing, whether that was Yellowstone or Alaska or Costa Rica. But yeah, I think my parents in like 5th grade, I was already being like, I'm going to be a wildlife veterinarian.
Good. I love it. I always am fascinated with at what point in somebody's life their life work became obvious, whether they knew it or not. That's wonderful. And Betty, thank you so much for the introduction as such a wonderful speaker. And you had a question.
I do. Thank you, Patricia. And thank you, Carolyn, for an outstanding presentation. Very informative. I have a couple questions about, first of all, what do we do as someone hiking on a trail if we saw a coyote or a mountain lion? That's one question. And the second one, are you ever afraid when you go out hunting or looking for mountain lions or whatever? Thank you.
So I'm never afraid, and I encourage you not to be either. Mountain lions and coyotes, they don't want to mess with us. I will say coyotes are more likely to become habituated when people are putting out trash. And so that's something that I really work with in communities, is trying to encourage people not to be inadvertently habituating coyotes, but always stand your ground. I think with coyotes, people often think that like the safe distance is a lot further than it actually is. And coyotes and young mountain lions are really curious. So they're seeing you and they're like, what is this creature? And we sometimes are like, oh my God, this mountain lion I came across a mountain lion and it just was staring at me. So I'll separate out mountain lions and coyotes. So mountain lions, if they want to attack you, you're not going to see them coming, right? So if you're walking and you see one, it's being like, I wonder what this is as it's moving by. Stay calm, stand your ground. If they do act aggressive back. Don't run. That's number one, right? Do not run. If you have a small kid or a small dog, pick them up, be big. But for the most part, they're just going to be like, all right, person here, I'm going to wander off. In the incredibly rare occasions, they're going to, try to approach. That's when, just like you would a bear, act big, throw something at it, be the tough human. They're not actually full apex predators, right? They're still attacked by wolves. They'll be attacked by bears. So they're not going to be willing. They're not like an African lion that's willing to take on more. They're going to be like, you know what? I'm out of here.
Yeah, they're not like a big cat.
Right. So they actually evolved with American lions, if we're thinking thousands of years ago. Mm-hmm. And even in areas where they overlap with bears and gray wolves, that's a concern for them. Bears and gray wolves absolutely steal their kills and will attack them. So they're not going to be, they're not the true top of the food chain in the US.
How effective would be like one of those collapsible those spring-loaded umbrellas? You open it out and it goes boom.
So that's actually one of the suggestions we have for dealing with coyotes, because it's like, oh my gosh. So I imagine with mountain lions, it also would be. But I mean, just if you see a mountain lion in the wild, consider yourself incredibly lucky.
Yeah.
It's
No, I just,
really
yeah, I
rare
want
to
to
see
photo
that.
it. I don't, it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
'cause
Just
I,
try to get a photo.
because I imagine, yeah, if they were going to attack me, I wouldn't see them coming because they're an ambush predator.
Exactly. And I mean, millions of people are out hiking in California. The very, very few attacks that happen typically are at night. So, if you're hiking during the day, odds are incredibly low. But also the few attacks that have happened in the news within the last few years that have been on, kids kind of 12 and younger. I will say, like, the one attack, the kid didn't even need stitches. And it just was the parent yelling, and that got the mountain lion off. So that helps put it in perspective. If you're just like, get out of here, the mountain lion's like, whoa, all right, never mind.
Dominance, yeah, established dominance.
Yeah, like, my bad. Mistook that for a prey item. It's not. And they'll take off. So coyotes also stand your ground, and that is a problem where people like become fearful of them. And coyotes, man, canids are really smart. Think about how your dog can manipulate you, right? And they can read you and they figure out. Coyotes are the same. And even in a neighborhood, they'll learn which individuals they should respect and which individuals they can totally push your buttons. So stand your ground. Don't be afraid of them. Don't have your chihuahua off leash, right? The coyote's going to think it's a prey item. Your dog looks the same as a rabbit. So just be cognizant of that. Keep your cats inside. But otherwise, if you're hiking on a trail, if it's a den, probably don't hike that area. Dens are in the spring for coyotes. That's when we typically get the most calls about aggressive behavior, just because the coyote wants you to stay away from its pups. And if you give them that respectful distance and back off, then the coyote's going to leave.
All right, we have questions from Tim Durkin and then Hugh Coppin.
Carolyn, very, very interesting, fascinating presentation today. Thank you for expanding my knowledge on mountain lions. In an effort to be correct, is the word cougar and the word puma, are those synonyms for mountain lions, or are they different breeds or species?
They're synonyms. So mountain lions, cougars, pumas, there's another one that I'm even blanking on that's used elsewhere in the US. They're all synonyms. I think it's the carnivore with the most names of any carnivore, of any or any species in the world. It's all the same.
Catamount.
That's the other word.
Catamount.
The other observation I made is when I was hiking in New Mexico, I was told that there had been sightings of a mountain lion. And I said, well, what's the best thing to do to avoid it? And they said, see it first. I said, okay. And they said, if you want to see a mountain lion, look up. That any mountain lion that is going to attack will almost always come from above, from a rock outcropping or a low-hanging tree. So you won't find them on the ground if you are, in fact, their intended target. Finally, the last thing is, as far as livestock protection, here in Texas, we use donkeys, particularly jennies, the female donkey, who are extremely protective of a group of cattle, a herd of cattle, if they were raised with it. The jacks, the male donkeys, they can't be relied on. But it's because donkeys hate canines, but they're terrified of felines. Even a house cat will bother a donkey, but no, the coyotes, they want nothing to do. So it would be nice if they could work against mountain lions too, but they don't want anything to do with it. So thank you again for your presentation, and let's keep looking up.
Hugh?
Yeah, Carolyn, fascinating presentation. Thank you so much. And what intrigued me is some of the methods that you're already using that we're familiar with in Africa. We, in fact, bring in someone who you may even know. She was also a lion researcher at Wild Crew in Wangi, got her PhD through Oxford in lion research. And she now runs her own not-for-profit, going to the rural communities around anywhere where the wildlife areas are. And one of the things that they are doing is exactly what you were talking about, those wild fences around the bomas because when the lions can't see through it, then they don't go in. They don't bother with the roof for it, because even though the lions could jump it, they can't see, so they're not going into it. And of course, the other one that they're concerned about is which you have less problem with here, is elephants coming in and just completely devastating a crop. But it's those two animals which are, again, when you get into the human conflict areas, where the areas where human beings and animals have to live together, and her business and her passion, when we bring her into camp for a couple of nights and a day, and talking to our guests about the balancing out and keeping the villagers safe from the predators and the villagers' crops and their livestock. So thank you for what you're doing. Fascinating presentation, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thanks you. Yeah, probably our networks overlap. Absolutely. We're lucky in that we don't have species like elephants that are a true threat. But I will say, this whole idea of trying to keep livestock safe, people may not realize it, but Sonoma County, at least historically, the last few years are a bit different, because there's now a kind of a special added protections on mountain lions as they're being reviewed as a species, whether to give them further protections in California. But Sonoma County, the owners of smaller stock, actually are one of that county is responsible for the most depredated mountain lions. So the most mountain lions that are killed as a result of livestock depredation. And I find people often think of oh, Marin, Sonoma, wine country, surely wildlife is really protected. And actually that's where we're losing Sonoma County, where we're losing the most mountain lions. So trying to protect the livestock is really crucial for trying to mitigate this issue.
Good. Just to mention that Peter Winkler, Claudette Good O'Neill, and Christine Torrington joined us a little later than the announcements. Always good to see everybody. And we have a question that Pete can answer. One of our guests, Julie, wants to know how to become a member. And Pete, I believe we ask you to attend 3 meetings, is that right, to make sure you want to join us, and then we'll take your $100?
Yes, yeah, we'll even take your $100 before you attend the 3 meetings. But in any case, it's a pretty simple process. There is an application online. My wildlife has just started to bolt here. In any case, there is an application which you can fill out online. It is $100. That's the dues for the year. That's the only fee that you would need to pay. And the requirement is, yes, that you do attend 3 meetings. And it's a good idea. Attend 3 meetings. If you like it, great. If you don't like it, well, no loss there, correct? So that's basically how you do it. Find that application. It is on the website. You can fill it out and send it in. I believe for new members, we are sending those applications to UTUC. And he will take it from there.
And Hugh is pulling a face like, I don't know if you're yawning, Hugh, or think, oh, really, am I getting them? I'm not quite sure. However, don't worry. If and Gary, make sure that Antonio and Craig have the right email to get Julie on the mail list.
I have another question, Patricia.
Yes.
Carolyn, could you tell us a little, first of all, 2 questions again. Do you have any idea how many mountain lions there are in Marin County, number 1? And number 2, how was your trip to Brazil with the jaguars? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So we don't know how many mountain lions are in Marin County. This is where we're still, people still doing research, and the wildlife department still trying to, count how many there are. And it's a lot harder than it seems to get an accurate estimate for numbers. But stay tuned, because that is something that's being worked on. And yeah, I recently got back from a trip to the Pantanal region of Brazil. And if anyone hasn't heard of it, it's on the western edge of Brazil, and it's the world's best jaguar viewing area. And it's a seasonal wetland, so it reminded me a lot of the Okavango Delta in Botswana, which is also a seasonal wetland. But if you want to see jaguars, highly recommend it. It was incredible. Shoot me an email if you want. I can give you the lodges we stayed at. But I mean, it was amazing. I saw 18 jaguars in 6 days. And we saw them from boat, saw them from a car. But they also, is fascinating. I got to chat with researchers down there because they have the same issues we do, right? Conflict around the world is so similar, especially with cats. But the biggest difference is that between jaguars and mountain lions, because they do have mountain lions down there as well, but they're underneath jaguars in the chain. So there actually aren't that many mountain lions because where there are a lot of jaguars, there are much lower densities of mountain lions. But jaguars can't jump, or they don't jump into corrals. So they're able to protect livestock just by putting two electric wires at the base of corrals to keep them from going under and through the fence. So chatting with the researchers, I was like, man, you guys are lucky. It's a lot harder to keep out mountain lions, right? I mean, I'd love to be able to just put 2 electrified wires at the base of a fence and have that solve your problem. But again, and they had great stories of jaguars then learning to just hunt during the day when the animals are outside of the corral. I mean, these cats are very smart. So it's up to us to try to continually outsmart them to keep our animals safe.
All right, we have a question from Julie Donnelly, who wants to join us more often.
I wanted to know, since next week is a live meeting, does it still have Zoom? Like, can those of us who aren't in San Francisco still join? Okay.
Not for the live meetings.
And that happens once a month?
Once a month we meet in person. It's usually, Pete, correct me, the 3rd Wednesday of the month?
No, you're one Wednesday off. It is the 4th Wednesday of every month.
Okay.
We meet live. We meet at the Marines Memorial Club, 609 Sutter Street, at the corner of Mason. If you are a guest of a member, that is fine. The only thing that we ask is you got to pay the $31 and you can come too. But yes, we do meet live once per month, 4th Wednesday of the month.
Well, I wish I could fly out to San Francisco, so I'll just see you the following week.
May I just make a comment, though, that it's not a real meeting. It's just a breakfast gathering. So nobody is missing any meetings of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. So
no,
and there's no speaker at these meetings.
Yeah.
It's basically just, very low key conversation, no speaker, no formal program.
It's just, it would be so nice to meet you all in person. So if I ever get the opportunity to get to San Francisco, I'll make sure I plan accordingly.
Okay. Where do you live, Julie?
Sarasota, Florida.
Ah, okay. Yeah.
And I've heard you speak so many times, Patricia, because I'm in NSA.
Well, thank you. And you still turned up. That's wonderful. We appreciate
No,
it.
you're wonderful. You're wonderful.
All right. Superb. Well, we have, let's see, we have 6 more minutes if anyone has another burning question for Carolyn. Yes, Hugh Tuck. Sorry, Les Anderson. You need to unmute yourself. And I did hear Jim Simpson in the background. Les, you know how to unmute?
Okay.
There,
There
yes.
you go.
Okay. I ran the Boys and Girls Club of San Francisco and Mendocino County with 2,000 acres. And what we have mountain lions, we have bears, and we have deers, and a lot of other animals. But I've run into many mountain lions on the way. And when I do, I would look at them, they'd look at me, and I'd wave at them, and then not wave at them, but just take an eye on them. They'd take an eye on me, they'd walk away, they'd look back at me, and I look at them, and they'd walk away from me all the time. Now that'd been about maybe 30 mountain lions I've seen over 75 years in Camp Mendocino. And there's a lot of mountain lions on there. We have little cameras that go around, and we see one with 3 and one with 2, and see a lot. And what we do, we don't have any trouble with the bears, and the mountain lions, we don't have any trouble with the mountain lions in our camp because we have about 1,500 people in the camp. So we have to be very careful about that one. But we haven't any mountain lions in the camp itself. They go on the areas. They go for they want to kill. They kill deer. That's one thing they do, but that's about it. So I've never had any trouble with the mountain lions. So that's it.
Well, Les, we just look at you and we know you're an alpha male. Okay, good. Well, Christine, you have a question?
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I was raised in Colorado. I never actually have seen any of these kinds of creatures in person except in zoos. But it was fascinating to learn all about, and your positive attitude is to not to embellish them or make them more wonderful and friendly than they actually are, but to help us understand from the time they're born to the time they become adults, etc., how they are special. And I appreciate your enthusiasm and the information. Thank you so very, very much. Nice hearing from you.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Good. Well, thank you very much. This has been a wonderful, spectacular meeting, as always, of the Golden Gate Breakfast Club. Thank you to everyone who invited their friends. Great to see guests. And certainly, we're always thrilled to see you. It's wonderful to have our future meetings and their teams coming in to check us out in advance. And next week, if you're going to the meeting at the Marines Memorial, or if you are going to John Mather's Celebration of Life Saturday, let Craig and Adams know. And with that, this is your meeting.